Hello guys, this is Gnergard, and today I wanted to bring you an overview of the different Tearlament variants that are being theory crafted right now. This is not going to be an introductory video to Tearlament, so if you don't know what the cards do or how the combos work, I recommend for you to go to some other YouTube channel and watch some combo videos there. There's a lot of great content out there in the TCG already. But if you're here to get some more of the insights that I've got from playtesting and the variants that I've tested and what I think about them, then you've come to the right place. So today I wanted to share with you 4 lists. That's the branded variant, the danger variant, the P.U.N.K variant, and the more pure variant with King of the Swamp. And I wanted to share with you some of the results that I've got from testing. So let's hop right into the branded variant. So the branded variant tries to incorporate a small engine of branded cards, just a small one. So just Alubar, the branded fusion, branded opening, and that's pretty much it for the main deck cards. No like Despian Tragedy, no Adlib, because that's just a lot of extra, and I think you don't need that. Although I wanted to experiment with a variant that plays a bit more of the Despian Tragedy, because you can mill Despian Tragedy too and get something, but it's really hard to fit all of that in. So this is like the minimum. It's kind of oriented at an OCG list that I found. So the good thing about this list is that branded fusion can get you any dark into the grave. So so you have the Shaddolls, which you can mill, but most importantly, you can get to your Tearlament engine really quickly. So one branded fusion can get you into a Mirror Jade and a Masquerade, for example, because you can just mill a Tearlament with an Alubar. You use the branded fusion to go into your Lubellion play, into the Mirror Jade, and the Tearlament Engrave can then fuse with the Alubar to do like either Despian Curtis or Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. So that's just like a standard line you can do. Obviously, there's a lot more you can do depending on what you mill. If you already have a Tearlament, you can put a Shaddol Engrave and have your window access that way. So another interesting part about this deck list is that we run Fusion Deployment, which is a really powerful card. So what it says is you reveal one fusion monster in your extra deck and special sound from your hand or deck one of the fusion materials which are listed on it. So in this case, we have 2 targets. Most of the time you will go for Rhino Heart, which is listed on Kaleido Heart. But sometimes you can even opt to go into a Fallen of Albas, like going second. You can special summon a Fallen of Albas from your deck, discard a card, which is a cost, sadly, so it does not trigger your Tearlaments, and this way force out interaction with your opponent. Or you already had the Dark Ruler Nomad, you can just fuse away. So the advantage that I see in the branded variant is that you have a high density of power cards. So if you look at the list, you have obviously a Tearlament. So Rhino Heart is a 1-card starter. The field spell gets you to Rhino Heart. We have Fusion Deployment, which gets you to Rhino Heart. You have Instant Fusion, which gets you into Kit Kalos. You have Foolish Burial, which can just get you any of the Tearlaments Engrave, and that where you fuse right away. And for the branded part, you obviously have Alubar, but more importantly, you have branded opening, which the send to the graveyard effect from hand is actually part of the card effect, not a cost. So you can actually use branded opening, special summon Alubar while discarding a Tearlament, and then the Alubar triggers, and you can also use the Tearlament effect to fuse with the Alubar right away, if you have nothing else in your graveyard, that is. And obviously we have branded fusion, probably the most powerful 1-card, just power card we have. That's why it's an Ash Magnet, right? So branded fusion just gets you into Mirror Jade and any Tearlament and you want in your grave, except for Reinhardt because it's water. So that's the advantage. Another thing is you have an option of going for a smaller tier engine. So you can say, I don't want to have the full engine, I just want to have a couple of Tearlaments. I've seen lists in the OCG actually going for like only 3 or 4 Tearlaments, so you have branded fusion targets. So you can go more into a Despia branded route, but I think if you play Tearlaments, you kind of want to have the most Tearlaments in your deck, so you have the best mills possible. But certainly an option to go to a smaller engine. And another advantage, obviously, is you always have the access to the Shadal engine as long as you can go to the branded fusion if you have the Tearlaments with it. Now, for the disadvantages, and this is the first version I tested, it's kind of limited by fusion place because both branded fusion and fusion deployment lock you into fusions for the whole turn. So not just after the activation, even before. So you cannot do any non-fusion plays before. That's why in your extra deck you see we only have the Redoer just because he's so good. Like if you don't get to one of these cards or you cannot resolve them, then the Redoer is still an option. But other than that, we're mostly fusion, and you know how most, like if you played the last format, full fusion decks, you're gonna get D-Barrier. If D-Barrier is still a card, which I still expect it to be, a lot of people say nobody's gonna play D-Barrier, but I can't see it because a lot of power plays of Sprite and Tearlament are still Xyz or fusion. So the other thing is, I said you can go down in the Tearlament core, but that way you have worse mills, but then you're trading the worse mills for like more tech space, so it's kind of a trade-off. It's kind of awkward. Like this list should have tech space, but you kind of have to fit both of these engines in. So you don't have the best tech space, but not the worst tech space. So that's it for the branded version. Now, for the next version that a lot of people have talked about is the danger version. I got this list from the OCG. I had two of my friends playtesting while I was watching this list, so I didn't playtest it myself, but it didn't do too well in testing. We still have to do a bit more, but from testing, this did the worst. Now, let's go into what the danger version actually does. And the danger version is you just have a small danger package. So the OCG list had a small danger package. You can only also play like Chupacabra if you want, which is also a level 4. Or the good dangers like Jackalope, because Jackalope can just special these, but Jackalope's level is a bit odd. We chose Nessie and Mothman because Nessie is an Aqua, which is important for fusions. And we have Mothman, which is a level 4, and also the discard effect lets you draw a card and discard a card, so that can trigger your Tearlament effects as well. The big advantage of this list is that due to Mothman or if you play Chupacabra, you can go into rank 4 plays more easily. So that's why you have in our extra deck, we see these 4 Xyz monsters. Obviously, Toad belongs to the Bahamut Shark. Now, you're going to ask yourself, why Bahamut Shark? You can't do it with Mothman, but the dangers are different types, and they're all dark. So if you have like a Mothman engrave and one of the Tearlaments, you can fuse them together for Muddragon of the Swamp, and you can use Muddragon of the Swamp plus Rhinoheart, go into Bahamut Shark, and the Bahamut Shark gets you into Toad. So this list has a good time going into rank 4s. Obviously, Abyss Dweller is insane in the mirror, and with Muddragon or Rhinoheart, it gets an attack boost. Another option would be the Baguska. We opted to have the Codebreaker Virus Swordsman as the OCG list because this is a target for Deck Devastation Virus, which is very, very strong against its Blight. Another advantage, I already talked about it, is the Xyz plays means you're not as locked into fusion plays. So we still have a big portion of fusion monsters in our extra deck here, but you can definitely decide to like cut the super poly targets and the super poly for other tech cards, and then you have more space for like link plays. Because the dangers, if you go, for example, also with the bigger danger core, you can just spam more monsters and that way make plays. And yeah, that's it for the advantage of the danger list. Now, disadvantage is you have decent amount of tech space here again, but that means you have a small danger core. It's similar to the branded version where you have to manage it a bit. And also, like, dangers and techs are kind of weird because you just want to use, like, dangers thrive off of having a lot of targets that you can discard, otherwise you won't plus off of them. But if you have techs and discard them, then you won't gain anything off of them. So that's a disadvantage of the danger list. And also, the dangers themselves don't do much. So if you play into a board and you use a danger, it doesn't really threaten anything unless you play the level 8 ones, or Bigfoot, or the, I forgot the name, the bird. They actually have a big amount of attack, so you can swing over stuff. But the level doesn't really fit with what we're doing here. So Yeah, if you're playing into a board, the dangers themselves don't do anything. You have to use the danger bodies with something else to make a play, and that's easier to negate because you use 2 resources to do one thing. Instead of the, for example, the branded version, it just has 1 power card that you have to negate, like the branded fusion. So that's one disadvantage, and the other disadvantage is Mothman going blind into a matchup or like in the mirror. You don't really want to use the effect, right? You don't want your opponent to draw a card, discard a Tearlament, and then window lock you while you're in your first turn. So that's a disadvantage of the Mothman. Sometimes you just can't trigger it. So yeah, that's it for the danger version. Let's move on to a version that is pretty popular amongst TCG players and that hasn't been played really in the OCG, and that's the P.U.N.K version. So you should all be familiar with P.U.N.K if you played in the last format. E-Tele gets you into Chaos Ruler, and Chaos Ruler mills you 5, adds you a card, and from there on, because of Deer Note, you can go into either Hulky Fibrex or the Zombie Vampire, depending on what you're going for. So the advantage of this deck is it has a really, really high turn 1 ceiling. So 1 teleport gets you into a Hulk play, which then can get you into Baron. And then from there on, you have a negate on board and can do your Tearlament plays. What's also very interesting about this list is that you have consistent window access through Crystron Hulky Fibrex into Shadow Falco. We're not playing Squamata and Beast here, which we have to mill, but we can just go into Shadow Falco, which is also level 2 tuner. So you can go into Chaos Ruler, and then with Chaos Ruler and Xiamen, you go into Hulk. Hulk brings out Falco. You bring back the Chaos Ruler, and then you can make Chaos Ruler and Falco into Baron. And you have the Shadow Engrave, you have the Negate on board, you still have the Hulk, which can go into Formula Synchron. And yeah, that's really nice to have consistent window access, and then from there on out, you can do your Tearlament plays. Now, if you paid attention here, you're gonna mill during your Chaos Ruler, and that can trigger your Tearlaments, so that's a big advantage, but I'm gonna go into it a bit later on the weaknesses. Another advantage of this list, obviously, is not locked into fusions. If you look at the extra deck, we have fusions, synchros, Xyzs, and link monsters. So we actually have a lot of ways to play around D-Barrier. Funnily enough, the Hulk hit to 1 actually matters in this deck a lot because we play Selene. There's actually no Veiler in this. There should be a Veiler, otherwise Selene won't work. But the Hulk play obviously is used for the first turn, but also if you want to go into access code. So if you had 2 Hulks, you can do 1 each, but this way it's a bit harder, still manageable. Other than that, there's a lot of potential still for future exploration because like we just play E-Tele into P.U.N.K, so we can do whatever we want. And probably Sightlock our opponent too, but yeah, this deck has a lot of options, and the Chaos Ruler can just get you into your Tearlament plays. Now, for the disadvantages, obviously because of the P.U.N.K engine, you have to play a couple of cards that are bricky, so like Xiamen Normal Summon is okay sometimes. Drawing the Deer Note is kind of sad, so that's all fine if you're going first, but if you're going second, the bricks actually matter. Like you play into a board and you have a couple of cards that don't do anything on their own, and the opponent has a Toad plus a Sprite Elf, and then they already have 2 negates, and that leaves you with like a little room to make plays. Whereas the more pure variants just have, like the branded variant, for example, has a lot of power cards that you can force your opponent to use their interaction on. And the other disadvantage is it's kind of awkward to resolve the main combo, because you go into Chaos Ruler, you mill, then you can go into a lot of Tearlament plays because you mill 5, but you're going to do all the Tearlament plays before actually setting up your negate, because that's just how the combo is ordered. So a lot of people say Nibiru is not going to be a card next format because of Sprite. So I don't think anyone will main deck Nibiru, but you still have to keep in mind if there's a shift that gets people to play Nibiru, how this will affect the combo. And in this case, you would make your Tearlament plays, and you don't want to do Winda during the Chaos Ruler because you're you still haven't gone into your Baron. So you also don't want to not use the Tearlament effects of the when you use the Chaos, right? Because then why are you playing it? Is it just to get you into Baron? That's not worth it. So that's a bit of an awkward spot in the combo, but for the start of the format, where like most people won't even side Nibiru, I don't think it matters, but it's still something to keep an eye on. All in all, the P.U.N.K version is definitely one to look out for because there's still a lot of room for exploration, and it also has like the highest potential of the turn 1 board. And E-Tele is just one hell of a card. For the last variant, this is the one that I like the most during testing so far. It's just pure with King of the Swamp. So King of the Swamp has a lot of implications for this deck. So King of the Swamp is Aqua Monster, which is relevant for our fusion plays. So Kit Kalos is Aqua Monsters, and Reinhardt too. So this just gives you a body when you discard it to get a polymerization. And the polymerization also can get you into plays. So for example, you do your milling, maybe you miss some of your milling, you're left with a body on board, Tearlaments in hands. In the normal list, you would just pass your turn, but in this list, you can go polymerization and fuse away the bodies that you have no use for and make plays that way. Another advantage of having being able to play polymerization is we can play Guardian Chimera, and this is a very, very powerful card going second. I think the test for Tearlament will be which list is the best going second without giving up too much of the turn 1 board. So Guardian Chimera helps a lot with that, because what you can do is if you have a Tearlament on board, or even two is the best, if you can somehow manage it into a board to get 2 bodies on board, you can go on polymerization and your opponent has to negate the polymerization, and that's just like you got a body into the grave and you just used 1 polymerization for one of the interactions, because if they let this through, what you can do is you fuse 2 of your Tearlaments from the board and 1 card in your hand into Guardian Chimera, and you go chainlink 1 Guardian Chimera and chainlink 2 some of your Tearlament effects. So they cannot toad the Guardian Chimera, and they also cannot imperm or veil out, because we have polymerization in grave, which due to Guardian Chimera's effect is well, polymerization is in your graveyard, you cannot target this card with card effects. So the Guardian Chimera, when it hits the board, your opponent cannot do anything about it because it's chain blocked and untargetable, unless they have something that like negates everything on board. But so it also doesn't target when it destroys cards. So into a sprite board, if you fuse 2 bodies from the board, you'll be able to destroy both the Totally Awesome and the Sprite Elf while being protected from a negation. So if the opponent has that board, they can say, okay, my toad is gone, so I'm just going to use the toad to negate one of the grave effects of Tearlaments. So great, then you can, because it doesn't target, you can just target the elf and something else, and still the board is broken. So that's a big advantage of King of the Swamp going second. Going first, obviously, it puts an extra body on board. So if you do the standard combo with Rhinoheart, but you also have the King of the Swamp, you can just use the King of the Swamp to get a polymerization. You go Rhinoheart, you ditch a Tearlament, and then you can fuse with the King of the Swamp in the grave to get into your Kit Kalos and do your plays from there. And what that does for you is it leaves you the Rhinoheart on the board, which is level 4. So you have already half of your Time Thief Redoer. And you just have to get 1 other level 4, which is very easy to do in this list, obviously. For example, your Kit Kalos can just go and search you your Shaylin, which is level 4, and you can special summon from hand, and there you go, you already have the Time Thief Redoer, or the Abyss Dweller for the mirror. Another advantage of the King of the Swamp is for the level 4 plays, you can just go King of the Swamp plus any tier in the grave to fuse into Caliga, which is Alistair plus a Dark Monster. The King of the Swamp will be the Alistair in this case. And this is a floodgate, although as Tearlament, you don't really want to put that limitation on yourself because you're going to play in both turns. So in most cases, you don't really want this on board, but what this does for you, it's also a level 4 that's really easy to make because it's just King of the Swamp plus any Tearlament. So that's just a free level 4 that you can special summon on the board. So you have that on the board, another Tearlament, make Redoer, and you're good to go, or Dweller. Another advantage of the King of the Swamp is also you can fuse it plus any Tearlament into Millennium Ice Restrict, which will protect you from Effect Veiler or Ash Blossom or Ghost Ogre or any hand trap that just goes to the grave as cost. It's just a neat little thing that you can do as well. So that's a lot of advantages that the King of the Swamp variant offers you, and obviously just because the King of the Swamp variant is just 3 King of the Swamp, 2 Polymerization, you can also go 2 and 2. This is just like to demonstrate this because you kind of want to draw it, so I just said, okay, we're gonna run 3. You have a lot of space too for non-engine, so you have like 3 Gamma, you have 3 Dark Ruler, 3 Super Poly, put here whatever you want, and then we just maxed out on consistency cards here, so Reinforcement of the Army, Terraforming. We have 2 of the traps, we have the Foolish Burial, we have double Shadows. So you actually have a lot of space in the pure version, so that's really nice about the King of the Swamp. The disadvantage here is, like, if you compare it, for example, to the P.U.N.K version, is the turn 1 ceiling obviously is a lot lower because you're just mostly doing Tearlament plays. What this does for you is just have more consistency in getting to your standard Tearlament board with like the Dragostapelia plus Trap, and then you have the Redoer with it. It's a bit more consistent in doing that, but it obviously cannot put out a Baron and other things that this version can do. It also doesn't have consistent window access, so you kind of have to mill one of the Shaddolls. There's a consideration of just cutting the Shaddolls for more consistency. I don't know if you add more consistency or more non-engine slots, but I think just running Shaddolls, the Gwynda is just so good. Is it Winda? I don't even have Winda in the extra deck. You should put in Winda. I forgot. But that's basically it for the King of the Swamp version. Also, it's very fusion centric, like compared to the P.U.N.K version, which has the best balance. You kind of want to do your fusion plays, otherwise what you're going to do is you can like maybe time the Redoer and pass if you're getting to it without fusion summoning. But like obviously if the D barrier, you're going second, and then going second you can't really do much. So that's it for the 4 variants. I personally like the King of the Swamp version the most, although I see a lot of potential of P.U.N.K being the best. The Danger version worked like the least well for me, and the branded version, I think it's a nice option to explore, but I don't think it adds much to the Tearlament. I think you're just playing like, you should either play like just Tearlaments or just branded, in my opinion, although Fusion Deployment is one hell of a card. So let me know in the comment below if this was helpful, what variant you liked the most, and I'll see you guys next time.